I am Austin. I've been working in AAA games and the film industry for about 4 years now, doing a lot of when I was in film virtual production, which was still running real time in Unreal Engine, and then in AAA games, obviously real time as well. I worked on Forza Motorsport, John Wick, Planet of the Apes, just to name a few things. Hi everyone, it's Austin again. I am going to be breaking down how to do one of these assets as a game ready asset. Sam shared with me this reference picture, and I wanted to kind of break through my process and kind of show you what I'm thinking along the way. I've done a lot of the other videos as I've done all the work beforehand, and then kind of just recapped what I've done, whether that be as a step-by-step follow along or a breakdown of a finished asset. But this time I think it would be better to just show my process and kind of what's going on. Nothing's going to be new as in terms of modeling or UVing here, but just more of the thought process. So when I'm looking at this reference image and I'm looking at these buildings, let's say we were going to make this into a game, what I'm looking for are repetitive details, or how I'd make a modular kit, for example, or just things to help speed up the workflow. So when I'm looking at this and I see these buildings, that is a little thick. I'm looking for repeated detail. So we have these similar awnings here. Um, these windows are pretty similar. And then we have these doors that are on every single house, right? And when I'm making this, it would take a lot of time to make three completely unique assets like this for us to each use them one time. So what I would do is make a base mesh for the building. So um, when I'm looking at this building, for example, this would be a great one because it doesn't have a bunch of extra details. I'd make this probably without the door, without all these little extra dressings that are on the building, like stairs, table out front. This one and this one have different chimneys, for example. Stuff like that can get added on to the asset after the fact, and it will help break it up. Whereas we can make this one building asset and basically have all of them different. Yes, the roof shingles might look the same, but you can flip it, rotate the building and get some different angles, and it won't be super noticeable. You can also do the roof piece as a completely different asset. So another option, and let me draw that, would be to have, this be its own asset for the top of the building here, and then you can have a couple different roofs, and then have the rest of the building as its own singular asset. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I'm going to start in Blender here. And of course, I have my reference up on the other screen, as you should always do. So we're going to start by importing a scale reference. So this is the Unreal Engine mannequin. You can export anything from Unreal. I would recommend doing so. That way you always have that scale reference here. And this isn't perfect, but we do see a person here. And generally, even in stylized, buildings are a lot of the time the same distance higher than a normal person. So think about your ceilings and then add about 2 feet to that. And that's how thick a floor usually is. It's usually about 10 feet. So we see that's close to that there. We could type all of that in manually and get exact dimensions, but with stylized, it is just a little bit more about the feeling rather than always being exact. So I will go in and just start modeling this. I'm going to start with big shapes and then go to small shapes. If you start in by adding too much detail too quickly, the rest of the mesh gets a little cumbersome to work with. So great. When I'm looking here, that roof looks to be a similar steepness, and I would just have the rest of the building to do. So when I'm looking at this, there are a couple different options that we have. There's a lot of detail with like the wood beams here that are extruded. You can either do that by adding new meshes or by taking faces and extruding them in. So I could inset the face and then extrude in, and that gives us that similar look. Either way is going to be valid. It doesn't particularly matter which one you choose. I think for this I am going to use, well, let's just, I guess, see how they both work. So we'll grab this face and this face, and then insert them in, inset, and then extrude them in. Great, so that looks about to be the thickness that we need. Again, we'll do that on the front faces here. Insert and extrude them in. Okay, awesome. Now when we look at this, it's hard to see in the reference. It's covered by other assets. So it might not be the biggest deal at the end of the world, except for here. We can see that these beams go straight down and there is no beam across the side. So now we'll just remove that. And don't forget your bottom faces. And a good way to level out the bottom of a mesh is just to select that bottom edge loop, go to scale mode, and then we can manually resize this to 0. And that'll make it perfectly flat. And we can line that up on the z-axis. Great, so then we need to do that on the front and the back as well. And then we'll fill in the bottom of the mesh. Okay, great. So it looks like that's going to work out. If not, we could always go back and do the other method. Remember to be saving frequently and incrementally, but you don't lose too much work. Okay, so now I think it would be great to do the front of the building here. So to me, that looks like the best way to do that would be to inset the faces and just extrude them in. This gap here looks to be much thicker than in the reference with this beam. So what I'm going to do is just bring this, nope, I'm going to delete this, delete these faces, and I'm going to add an extrovert here. And then I'm going to take these verts and merge them together. And then we'll fill in this gap here, bridge the edge loops, and then make a new face from those edges. Great, I think that is about what I want. We'll go ahead and make that a little flatter. Awesome. We're just playing here a little bit, again, looking at our reference that's on the other screen. And I don't want to do that again on the other side, so I'm just going to mirror and be the y-axis. Awesome. And then I can delete that extra edge loop if I want. Sweet. Okay. So, again, remember that this is the size of the person. These buildings are different sizes, so we can use, I have been looking at this one, we can use this one, and let's say that we do want a building to be a little shorter. We can always just take this and shove it into the ground a little bit, no big deal. Okay. Let us work on the roof now. I think the tiles are going to be the other difficult part of this. So what I'm going to do is add new meshes for those tiles. Let's see here. About the same slope as the rest of the roof. And they are going to be fairly thin. If I want to scale on the axis of my object, I can switch my transformation objects from global to local. So that we can make this thinner, and then it's a little bit easier to work with here. Okay. So the two easiest ways to do this are to do this with modifiers and then adjust them after the fact, or at least that's how I would approach this. Also, looking at the top here, we do have a row of bricks at the top that are going to cover any little gaps or seams that this has from not matching up perfectly. So we can have the top be a little messy, and we are going to know that it's going to be covered, so no big deal. Okay, so now we'll add an array modifier. And we'll set that to 1. And we'll call that 5. And then to do the rows down, we'll add another array modifier. And that would be -1. Okay. Awesome. So this is about the size of the shingles that we need. Let me go ahead and also mirror that across to the other side. And I need to apply my transformations. That way it knows how to mirror everything. Oh. So I need to apply these first, sorry. And now I can apply my transformations. There we go. Okay. So now we have the basis of our shingles laid out. The easiest way to do this, in my opinion, I am going to separate these out from each other so we can work with each side at a time. So separate selection. Okay. The easiest way to do this is to go into X-ray mode, and now we can grab all four corners of the pillars that we want. I have two meshes selected. And let's say we want the one on the left to be thinner. You know, very easy to make that thinner. And we can just repeat that process throughout the whole thing. Also, if we wanted to, we can go in and checkerboard pattern, so it's a little easier to select and separate out things. Separate by selection, because we have overlapping verts here. The other way that we can work with this is by taking faces, and so now we can select this edge and make this one thinner, and we'll just play with that. Find one of the references that you like, match that up, so, you know, select the objects, move them around, change up the sizes. I think when you do this, a lot of it is going to just be by hand. This is a part where you can just kind of have fun, experiment, see what works really well. Remember to adjust things on different axes. I'm actually going to do that at the very end. That way I can do them in groups. So let's see. We'll grab this one, make it a bit bigger. I'm actually going to make this one smaller, and then I will take it and duplicate it. And we'll put another one here, just to fill out the roof here. We'll do that across all of them. The other option you can do is if you have them selected like this and it's like, man, that was a lot of work, I don't want to do that again. You can always select the rest of these, delete them, and then select these and move it around, and then you have a different base to work with. And it just goes a little quicker. You'll also notice that we can't move it locally anymore because we applied our transformations. So the transformation is reset to be with Blender's global transformations, which is expected when we apply our transformations, but do be aware that that is what happens. So let me just grab this, and we'll move that over to here. Go around. This one can be bigger. This one is not the time where you necessarily have to match a reference. This is where having a good visual library is going to be really helpful. If you have a good understanding of, you know, general proportions and what the objects should be looking like based off of the style guide, it'll come in handy here. Okay, so now we just have the middle row to do. And do that. This one can go here. Just a little thicker. Again, we're just trying to make this look like it's not the exact same on each row here. And these two at the end are the same, so let's change those. Actually, I'm going to do this whole one because we have a lot of the same intersections here. Okay, awesome. So now we have this roof that looks kind of broken up. Wasn't too hard. I am going to combine these together. Sorry. Join. Okay. So So now these are all one mesh again, and we see that there's a lot of different variations here in the size or the depths of our shingles. So I can just randomly click through here, grab a couple, and then we'll make them have different meshes or different heights here. And this is why I wanted to do it at the end. It's a little quicker. You can just click some stuff and make some differences. Great. So we have that side. If we really wanted to, again, we could take this and mirror it across, save us some time. Great. So for my demonstration, I'm going to just do this for now. I would recommend doing the other side a little differently, just trying to speed this up a little bit so that we can get through more in a quicker fashion, and I'll leave a lot of the actual art assetting for you guys as you're working through the game jam. So now we're working on the top part of the roof here. Again, this is just going to be simple cubes, just because of the style that was chosen here. So I'm going to just make an array. If we want our array to have a little more of an offset between each mesh, we can do that just by making this Y value different, and you can always type things in if you want it differently than what Blender is going to give you. Okay. So again, these look to be actually much more similar in size than the rest of the shingles, but I am going to break it up a little bit just because I feel like that's what the style reference is telling me to do. So again, this is where your artistic creativity comes in. I'm going to leave this one the normal size. A lot of people tend to forget to do that when we're doing variations like this, of leaving one as the default size. And that's just a variation that is often missed. Okay, so we have our roof. Depending on the one you're looking at, some of these shingles get more complicated. Feel free to do that. It is fine either way, whatever you think is best. Okay, so there's some planks in the front. That's going to be really similar as well. Nothing crazy is really going on. I was going to just duplicate a mesh, but we'll make a new one. So this is essentially what the process is looking at the reference, finding it, and then modeling it as efficiently as we possibly can. So we'll have one in the middle, one on the side. Oops. And I'm going to make this tilted at the top so it blends in. And then we can do that again on the other side, or we can mirror it across. This is why it's nice to work right on the axis. Helps speed everything up a little bit. That way I don't have to do that triangle again. Okay. And then these are obviously a little too low. Great. So then we can take these, I'll join them together, and mirror them across this way. And flip so they're on both sides. Perfect. Okay. Again, a lot of these extra little additional details that have been added on, I would do as another mesh. That way you can easily reuse them on different buildings, change up their positions. So I would not model it into our base building here. This would be what I would consider my game ready base building. And I am going to actually adjust these to be down a little bit. Cool. All right, so then we have our fun little stylized cabin. I'm going to call that for here, and we can move on to UVs and texturing. For texturing on a building like this, I would not do it in Substance Painter. I would do this on Unreal Engine using tiling textures, and the reason for that is texel density. You'll find that a lot of times in games, they do not ship with 4K textures. At the most, you're going to see 2K. And the reason for that is disk space and efficiency. There's really no need to be using 4K textures. If for whatever reason you find yourself having to use a 4K texture, I'd maybe look at doing something else, breaking it into multiple UV sets if it's a single mesh, or if it's a building like this, we'll use tileable textures in Engine just because it would look really bad without it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is apply all my transformations here. That way I have these meshes to work with, and then I'm going to relabel that. So I'll call my meshes for organization. So we'll have shingles, top shingle, line, our planks, and then our base building. scale reference, which we won't export. So this will be just like all of the other ones that we've done. I have some plugins that I've found to help speed this up a little bit. Oh, and before I do that, I need to apply all my transformations to all my meshes. So I'm going to mark all of the angles that I need to as sharps and then turn those to seams and turn on Shade Auto Smooth for my meshes. If I was doing something that had more edge on it, that's something that I would have done beforehand. And then so we'll do that for all of our assets here. Okay. So if you don't know which ones have been UV'd, you can just select all of your edges, and the ones that have not had anything done will appear different. So, okay. So here's our asset, all UV'd, except for the bottom here, which I forgot to add as a face. So we'll make that a new face from edges and then mark seams here to get that ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to select my entire asset here, and we're just going to unwrap this in our UV grid. First things first, we're going to take a look at this and see if everything looks to be okay. This is a pretty simple model. The good thing about stuff in this style is nothing's going to be super complicated. Everything here is pretty basic shape-wise, so it should make it easier to UV and get this process going. But it's still good to do it once over and make sure that nothing looks too funky. Everything looks good to me. So what I'm going to do is go into a textile density checker so I can show this. So where you work in pixels per meters, a lot of the time is what I would recommend. You can do all these other options here, but as a team, you should decide what your textile density for your project is going to be. For a lot of times, I do like we'll use a 2048, and I'm going to calculate the textile density just so I can show you what it looks like. So 123 pixels per meter. A good way to think about that is when we're looking at a person here. A person is 1.5-ish meters, 1.2 to 1.5. So you would have 123 pixels of texture information on this entire person vertically and also horizontally. But think you have 123 pixels of texture. That isn't really the most. And so that's why we don't like doing buildings as unique textures. I would probably shoot for like 512 pixels per meter. Another way that may be easier to conceptualize is if I switch it to inches, you get 3 pixels an inch, which from this distance might not be a big deal, but remember, if we're going to be in a first-person game and we're going to be this close to our buildings as we're going inside, 3 pixels an inch is nothing. So we do need this to be a little bit higher, but the good thing about working with tiling textures is that our UVs do not have to fit inside of the 0 to 1 grid. So I can actually set my textile density to 512 pixels a meter. And you can see that this is much more massive compared to our UV grid, which is here in the middle. And you'll also see that we have overlapping textures. Both of those are okay in this instance. Again, because we're using tiling textures. If we were going to bake information or use unique textures, this would cause a lot of issues. But since we're not doing that, this will be fine. And we'll leave it at that. So the next thing to think about is exporting. So if I export this, I'm going to just go to here. Things to think about is how we are actually exporting. So we want to, and some of these are changed from default just because I've been working here. We want to limit this to selected objects. We don't need to export this guy at all. So I won't select him and I'll hit selected objects. We're only exporting meshes, so we're going to leave that there. Our scale should be set to 1. And these are fine. Everything else here is fine. Bake animation is usually on if you have it, and we'll leave it at that. So this is how we would export, but before I do that, I totally forgot to go over material assignments. So when we're using tiling textures in Unreal Engine, we apply materials in Engine to our different instances here. This is all wood, so I didn't cover it, but I do need to cover it in case you have an object with two different materials. So I'm going to use this windmill as an example for this. When we look at the top here of the shingles, those shingles are brown to me, or so they will be wood. So I will take a new material, and this is the material ball down here is how we would apply our materials. So I'm going to name this wood. By default, if you have a single material, it'll automatically apply it to your entire mesh, which in this case is what we want anyway. But let's say we needed some plaster breakup in here. We can add a second material by hitting this plus button here again, and let's say plaster, and I'm going to go ahead and assign that. The way I would do that is select some faces. I'll just use this one shingle as an example, select my plaster material and hit assign. You'll see that it changed the color. And I can go down to the viewport display, and the plaster looks to be a more orangey color, yellow-orange color than the wood. So that's how we would assign it to multiple materials on a single asset. But I'm going to go ahead and fix this up. Or I can just remove that material and it'll apply the other one. So now I'm going to select my materials that I have and apply it. We are going to leave the building as a different material in case there's a variation that we want to be a different material. But these beams, I think, should probably always be wood. So I'm going to go in here and select all of the faces on the beams, and then we'll assign that to the wood material again. And also the little bit of roof that we can see, and I'll fix those edges that are visible here in a second. Okay, looks like we have everything, so we'll add our wood and then assign it. Great, and these did not quite make it to the edge. Okay. Cool. So now what we would have to do is go into our UV editing because I adjusted it, apply my transformations, unwrap so that way they're the correct size again, and then reset my text lens to 512. Awesome. So now we have this asset. If you wanted to, if this was a unique asset, another thing to think about is what isn't being seen by the player. So we would never see this bottom. If we had a unique asset, it'd be really good to scale this down so that way when we pack it, it doesn't take up much information on our UV grid. But since this is a tileable, it A, doesn't matter, and B, won't be seen by the player regardless. So I can leave it like that. But this is an example of a game-ready asset that I think would be good to import into Unreal Engine at this point to see how it goes. So again, let me export this. So we would call this building 01. Cool. Oh, I missed some more faces. This would get pretty obvious in Unreal Engine when you see this. That's a little harder to see in Blender, but okay, now we can export this again. Cool. All right. So this is how I'd make one of these assets, and again, we'll do that over and over again. So let's say I wanted to make a chimney now. It's the same thing, match the reference. If you really wanted to keep the building here, you could do that. Model in the chimney. Oops, where did that mesh go? Model in the chimney how you would want it. Let's be a little taller. And then insert the face, extrude. Cool, so now we have our chimney, right? But if we were going to hide these meshes here, so you didn't see them anymore. And then export the chimney, because this would be its own asset. We don't want it floating here in space, so we would apply our transformations, go into our object properties here, reset the origin back to the mesh, and we can update this to 0, 0, 0. Okay. And then now that we're back at the origin point, I would move this up a little bit because I'd want to place it based on the bottom of the mesh. So wherever the origin is in Blender is where the gizmo is going to be in Unreal Engine. So just something to keep in mind there. So that's how you'd make